to welcome everyone to the regular Planning Commission meeting for the City of Williamsburg, September 16th, 2015. Mr. Rhodes, if you could call the roll, please.
Certainly. Mr. Charlotte?
Here.
Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Mr. Clee?
Here.
Mr. Florakis?
Here.
Ms. Stafford?
Here.
Ms. Macbeth?
Here.
Mr. Julian?
Here. Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of our minutes from August 19th, 2015. Anybody on the commission have any additions, corrections, deletions? No?
I move we accept the minutes as prepared.
I second that.
Mr. Rhodes?
Mr. Charlotte?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Clee?
Aye.
Mr. Florakis?
Aye.
Ms. Stafford?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Julian?
Aye. Okay, we have nothing on the consent agenda. We'll move into our public hearings. We have 3 today. They're zoning text revisions based on the General Assembly actions. And it's PCR 15-019, PCR 15-020, and PCR number 15-021. Reed?
These are 3 changes that we need to make to bring the zoning ordinance into compliance with the changes that were made to the Virginia Code based on Virginia General Assembly actions this last session. The first one, 15-019, removes a sunset date of the current law that delays payment of certain dwelling unit cash proffers until after the final inspection of the property. The second, 15-020, is a major restructuring of the powers and duties of the Board of Zoning Appeals pertaining to the granting of variances. The primary change is eliminating the requirement for an unnecessary or unreasonable hardship to be found before granting a variance. This has been replaced by an unreasonable restriction. In addition, there are new restrictions for ex parte communications between staff, board members, and applicants. And our final case, PCR 15-021, adds provisions to our site plan requirements for approval of site plans that solely involve commercial real estate. There's a 60-day time limit, which we meet. These are mandatory, so we have to do it. So for that reason, the staff recommends the City Council that these changes be approved. And I think it would be possible to have a motion when we get to that point in the meeting dealing with all 3 of these cases.
All right. Right now, I'll open the public hearing for comment. If anyone would like to come forward, please state your name and address for the record. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and come back to commission. Since we really don't have a choice.
No, but we still have to approve it.
Can we do these as a set?
Yes.
I move that we approve the revised text to the zoning ordinance as required by the General Assembly and specified in PCR 15-019, PCR 15-020, and PCR 15-021.
Second.
Mr. Rhodes?
Mr. Charlotte?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Clee?
Aye.
Mr. Florakis?
Aye.
Ms. Stafford?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Julian?
Aye. Okay. Moving on, open forum. If anyone would like to come forward and speak on any topic that relates to the Planning Commission.
David Crandall at 201 Harrison Avenue. I'm just here to encourage you to pick up on what Marvin said at least when I heard him at the business luncheon last week, Tuesday. And at that time he talked about he wanted to review everything, all the procedures that we were undergoing and using in our city, and to explore all of the possible alternate paths. and that we might worry a bit that if we've been doing something the same way for many years, it might quite possibly be out of date, except he probably said it a little stronger than that, and that he was interested in new procedures and policies that dealt with, and then he went on to describe all of the issues and the people that we're having to deal with in this 21st century. So one very, very important thing that goes on here is the CIP. You are making recommendations on behalf, as representatives for the citizens in the city, on millions of dollars of expenditures each year. And in the past, that has been generated within this building, and limited time has been there to react. And based on the last year's meeting, I remember Chris pointing out that the amount of money being spent on sidewalks was misrepresented, as the city spending a very tiny amount compared to the budget that was in there. The rest of it was coming from outside monies. And somebody asked the question, if we're going to spend $500,000 on a fire truck, I mean, shouldn't we have some feel for its urgency and how our fire trucks stack up relative to other cities' fire departments, et cetera? And I just was left that meeting not feeling very good that we were taking the best processes to create what our priorities are when we're spending the millions of dollars we are going to allocate based on the CIP. So I'd like you to consider the fact that I picked up from his talk that he wants a lot of citizen input. And he wants it up front, and he wants us to review all of the procedures that we're currently using till we get to the point of a final decision. And so, one of you quietly said to me that, well, before we ever talk about something like this, let's wait for we have new leadership, and because that's an opportunity, clearly. And I think based on what he said at that business luncheon, he really wants folks like this committee, which is one of the two most important committees we have, arguably the most important, to really regroup and think about what would be best in terms of getting the maximum ideas and input from the citizens, the taxpayers, the businesses, when we go about creating priorities for how we're going to spend what amounts to millions of dollars. So I'm just here to encourage you to think broadly and start with a fresh slate. Years ago, we used to talk about starting with I forgot the exact phrase, but when we're developing a budget, we just start from scratch instead of what we've been doing every year. And I remember Chip Hoagland tried to get that across to no avail. Maybe that's partly why he only ran once for city council. But at any rate, you're all very able and very creative, and that's why you're here. And so I have a lot of confidence in you, and I just want to fire you up to really start from scratch in developing procedures and processes for creating a CIP that has broad citizen input. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cranby. Go ahead and close the open forum. And since David brought this up, we don't have anything under site plans and subdivisions, unfinished business. Maybe we can discuss that under our new business.
Sure. Under new business, I guess I wanted to raise the issue, I guess following off of what Dave was just bringing up, between the Business Roundtable luncheon that Dave was referring to, but also the EDA meeting last week that I attend as our liaison to EDA. Marlon Collins was there as well and was quite, I guess, open, or actually I'd say more encouraging to us thinking broadly and also taking sort of more of a citizen's viewpoint on some of these issues. I know that EDA is also quite interested in participating in more of the formation of the CIP from some of the other issues that we've talked about over the past few years. And so I guess I was wondering whether there was energy amongst us to actually move that forward now that we have the opportunity. Obviously, as a commission, we need to do that, not as individuals. And so was really, I guess, thinking that I don't think we even know what we don't know, or what the scope is of what we need to figure out. So I was going to suggest maybe that we would schedule a work session next month, get the documents in front of us to look at it, maybe get Jody Miller, who was carrying the water on this last year for the city, if she's still going to be the liaison, and start the process of our looking at it, then potentially getting EDA, broader citizen input to see how we go forward, so that we need to have this document in the January timeframe, but most typically, or in the 25 years plus that I've lived here, it's been, presented out to the public, to us, not that I was here 25 years ago, but here in the city, but to then have a very brief period of comment versus it being, I hadn't thought about it like this, but David's comment of the clean slate of the budget, just looking at this is many millions, this is what we've been thinking about, where we think priorities would be. So I think the initial step is there the energy desire to have a work session next month and see the preliminary documents and see if there's work to be done, or maybe what we've been being given is the best thing, but we don't know.
I think that makes sense. I would simply say I think we should be pretty targeted with how we look at that document. I'm not sure we're going to be able to, in a timely way, figure out what the status of our fire equipment is and who needs a computer downstairs, and that CIP document covers a wide range of stuff. So I have the energy for that, so long as we are thoughtful about it and not, trying to just start from zero. I don't think that's the right approach, frankly.
Well, Jeff, just like happened last year when I had questioned the fire truck, the chief was here immediately to tell us why he needed one. So
Sure.
I have a feeling people would react quickly.
Yeah.
And in the 4 years that I've served, we've asked every year to have more input into the CIP. And I, for one, would like to hold a work session and like to be involved earlier on instead of just being presented with it.
Right, and next month's October, so that does give us a few months before that January strike date when we officially have the annual, open forum at this level. Obviously, when we have a work session, we can, it's a public meeting, people can talk at that time. I know that some folks on EDA would like to, talk to us about what their thoughts are as well. So there is some time to have an initial work session, but maybe one also November, December. But yes, obviously, our scope of our own workload as well as the scope of our knowledge of these things is limited. So I don't think that we want to have a blank piece of paper, but that idea of that 5-year horizon that we're working on, and
Yeah, I think it'd be useful to have a better understanding of what input council wants us to provide them with, because I don't see how fire trucks are in our purview. I think that should be open, but I don't think it should be an open discussion that, the Planning Commission is the place to have the discussion about whether or not we need to invest in more fire trucks or more computer equipment.
Right.
So I think I would like to have it better defined what part of the CIP we really should be taking a look at, and then be more involved, as you said, in the beginning part of it, not in the end sort of approval of this complete thing that includes the fire trucks, which we really shouldn't be commenting on.
Can I ask Chris a quick question? Doesn't the General Assembly give us the power to control that?
You are part of the process for creating a CIP. So it starts with the Planning Commission.
It starts with planning.
But the state enabling legislation says that the planning commission may, is how that reads.
And you have been part of, the public hearings, all of that process starts at the Planning Commission level.
I agree with you.
Right. I think that there are things that we just aren't qualified to speak on as a budget priority.
No. Yeah, and I agree to some of those aspects as well. I think that where I've heard concern or just the feeling that words are said and they're not responded to, or wherever party you want to go on that, is, we will say year after year that we think that the highest priorities for sidewalks or underground lighting and those kinds of things, which are our purview, are in this order, but by the time we see the document, it's already been put into a different order, so, we come up with our order, but it doesn't stick. The Post-it note has already been worn off a little bit, it doesn't stick to the plan, So I think that those are the kinds of things that I think that we could be informing, and I think that part of that as well is, we're with the connection to EDA and the whole issue of the vitality of different parts of the city and how monies are spent to encourage that. I think also marries really well with a lot of the talk that we've had with Marvin about, this whole sense of place and how place drives things. And I mean, it's part of his whole rhetoric in terms of how he's presenting things. So,
David, how do you feel?
Well, at this point in my term, I've never seen the CIP document, so I don't know that I'm qualified to have a decision or a real opinion. I guess I'm just going to have to dive in when we get it, and I'll agree with what the rest of the commission agrees with the first time. Maybe not the second time, but the first time, I'll leave it to y'all.
I think a work session would be very useful.
Yeah, I agree with Andy and everyone else.
It looks like we'd like to formally request a work session in October.
As we've usually done work sessions in the past, we've had them the Wednesday after the Planning Commission meeting, which would be Wednesday, October 21st, and we've done it at 4 o'clock now. If you would like the city manager and or the deputy city manager here at the meeting, I would have to check with them, but I think for a work session we could, and I need to make sure this room is available. I'm sure it would be, but I think if it's acceptable to the commission, we could tentatively look at October 21st at 4 o'clock.
That would be great. And I think,
the only documents that are available at this time are the adopted CIP from last year, which is on the web, but I'd be glad to, I have a PDF of it, so I would be glad to send it out to everyone as a PDF if you'd like that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and do you know if Jody is handling that again this year? Or?
I think that is the plan.
Okay. So it'd be nice if she could attend.
So I'll go and talk to the city manager and the deputy manager.
Okay.
And we have from our legislate, if you look at the 1/14/15 meeting, planning commission meeting, and then that has all the documents that we got last year about it. And we wanted to review that.
Awesome. Okay. Anything under informational items? Any questions or comments on City Council report? Our monthly report, monthly financial statement? Okay, none. We have a public hearing scheduled for October 14th, 2015. It's PCR 15-024. It's to repeal and reenact the floodplain section of the zoning ordinance. These changes are required to meet the current federal floodplain standards.
Again, we don't have a choice.
Were they hot off the presses? We couldn't have taken care of them today.
It was we're lengthening our floodplain regulations by how many pages?
Going from 8 pages to, I think, 21.
Wow.
And
I just wanted to look at the maps and make sure I wasn't in a floodplain. That's all I did. It's like, oh, no, I'm safe.
yeah, essentially because of Williamsburg's topography, because of Chesapeake Bay regulations, you can't build in a floodplain. So
Yeah.
practically speaking, we don't need a floodplain ordinance because we're already covered by the Chesapeake Bay regulations. And for a while, we convinced the regulatory folks that that was okay, but then they said no, it wasn't okay, so we had to do a floodplain ordinance, and now we have to make it more detailed and complicated. So we will have that for you next month.
And like any good sign of fall, it's time for code changes based on changes in state and federal law.
Just filters through.
Wonderful. Thank you. Meeting's